Hi, welcome back to Transformation Point. My name is Kanini, and here at Transformation Point, we focus on healing, health, wealth, and relationships. So in this video, we are going to ask ourselves, how do you stop being boring and average and connect with your higher self? This is a good question to ask. Have you ever wondered how some people just transform like day and night from one day to the next, and you're wondering, I would also want to make the same kind of changes in my finances, in my relationship, in my health. You probably want to transform yourself somehow, Some of us are in desperate need of changing because you know that your finances should not remain the way they are. You know that your relationships cannot stay the way they are. You know that your health, you probably cannot stay the way you are for the next 10 years unless you want something terrible to happen. Some of us will have to do the shift from, just change, completely change. How do you make the change from your 1.0 version of you to make a 2.0 version of you? Because it is one thing to have skills. You look good on paper, but you know that you're not a transformed person. You're at best average, right? We have this society where we just go to school to learn mechanical skills, but inside of us, we are an empty shell. We are shallow. How do you make that shift from just being a plain person, boring, average, into a person who has connected with a higher version of themselves? So in this video, that's what we are wanting to look at, how to connect with our higher self. And I've made some notes here. In case you don't know, we are reviewing this book, The Road to Character by David Brooks. He has lots of lectures on YouTube. He also has this book that you can order on Amazon, a very, very wonderful book to read. It will change your life. It will transform you. Especially if you're a deep thinker and you like to ask yourself things like, how do I transform? How do you transform? So I will give you an example of how to transform. When you want to transform, there is one thing that you need to do. You have to connect with your higher self. That's the first thing that you need to do. You have to connect with your higher self and call it into existence. You have to summon your higher conscience into existence. If you're not able to do that, it's going to be very, very hard to connect with your higher spiritual self. So in this example, we are reading from this book by David Brooks, The Road to Character. We're going to look at one of the stories that he gives here. And one of the stories that he gives here is from a woman. Her name is Frances Perkins. This woman is living between the period of in 1911. She's a very young woman, and she gets to serve in Franklin Roosevelt's administration as the Secretary of Labor, and she goes into civil service and under Truman. But I want to know that this woman, there's a point in her life where she transformed like day and night. Even her own mother was like, I don't know my daughter anymore. She has changed completely. She moved from an average, boring person, and she tapped into her higher version, her higher dimension. And the change was so remarkable that her mother was like, I don't recognize my daughter anymore. When your mother tells you that she doesn't recognize you anymore, you know that you have really, truly made a shift that people are like jaw-dropping, because the shift is day and night. So before we go into how she transformed, that moment where she transformed, I just want you to see this woman for who she truly was. Remarkable. I don't know if you're familiar with the Great Depression, and this was one of the toughest time in America's history was the Great Depression. People were hungry. There was no work. The bank had collapsed. The economic system had completely collapsed. People were suffering. White people were poor. I don't even want to know how black folks were doing, because despite, the economy being poor, they were still being discriminated. That's another story for another day. But you can imagine the level of poverty, because even white people were poor. Like, it was terrible. So she was called in by FDR, the president, Franklin Roosevelt, and she is the woman behind the New Deal. Now, people are in depression. People are working jobs that's not paying them enough to eat. They have no jobs. The economy has collapsed completely. And people were suffering. It was great suffering. People were protesting, but it wasn't even enough. And this woman, she was in labor. She was the Secretary of Labor. She was appointed, and she has to think about how does she fight for the rights of the workers? How does she do this? She would create proposals and give the president a lot of options. This option, do we go with this option? Do you prefer this option, this option? And he would choose one, and then she would go again. Do you prefer this option because it has this? And he would say yes. And she ended up helping the president come up with minimum wage laws to ensure that workers were not exploited by the people they were working with, at least so that there is some fair in terms of, labor and pay. So she came up with minimum law. She came up with unemployment insurance. So if you do get unemployment, thanks to Frances Perkins, and she did a lot of things when it comes to Social Security. She made sure that this was set up, and also improving the safety in the workplace. We always talking about, I think it's that Foundation OSHA, where they always checking on workers if they're safe in the workplace. It's because of this woman. And I know that for sure that she has impacted millions and millions of workers in America, probably billions to come, and even she has impacted other labor laws in the world. So she has impacted a lot of people's lives because she tapped into her higher self, and she will continue making impact long after she's gone, long after we've gone past the Great Depression, because she was a remarkable woman, because she decided that she will step into her higher self. So she wasn't always remarkable. She was actually very, very average, and she was born. When she was born, her parents saw to it that she got an education. So Miss Perkins was well educated, but she wasn't the best in her class. Even her teacher thought she was lazy. She wasn't always like, the top class. Sometimes she was whiny. If she was made to, work on her grammar in Latin, she sometimes was too lazy. She was frustrated. She would cry. She wasn't like this, always like the best student in the class. No, she wasn't. And in 1911, she was in her 30s, and she was looking forward probably to get married and have kids and continue working and just live an average life where you go to work and you pay your bills and you have your family and that's it, right? She was not, looking to be anything more than the average person. She was okay just living her life the way we just normally live our lives. But something happened that changed her life, that she had to call in the higher version of herself. She had to summon the and tap into her spiritual powers and summon the higher version of herself because of the situation that she found herself in. So it was March. She was living in New York, and it was March 25th, 1911. And she was with her friends, and they were just taking tea during the day, just taking tea and just chatting, nothing, not having to think about anything. She was just having a regular time with her girlfriends. Then the butler comes and says, there's a fire. There's a fire, and they all get out. I can imagine them with their big, those clothes that they were wearing. She gathers them, starts running out of the building to see what's going on. And I think she is met with the shock of her life. She looks, there's this building 10 stories high. It's caught on fire. There is fire. But the sad thing is there are people trapped inside. Workers. This was a factory. They called it the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. And it had caught fire. Somebody probably used a match or a cigarette, and they dumped it on the bin. But inside that bin were scraps of cotton, because it was a cotton factory, and it caught fire. And then the fire just became uncontrollable. It just erupted. You can imagine it's a cotton factory, and everything can catch fire easily. And the person in charge, instead of realizing that there is a fire and start telling people to get out of the building, he started trying to put out the fire out on his own, and it wasn't working. And instead of clearing passages, the passages were blocked. So people became trapped, and the fire was consuming everything. So I can imagine her and all the other people watching at this mess, and people trapped in the 8th, 9th, and 10th floor had nowhere else to go. They didn't have, the building did not have ladders that they could get out of. They didn't have anything. So what they had to do was either stay and die or jump and die. There was no other option. So people started jumping to their death. Everyone who jumped died. And there was this man who saw other people who wanted to jump, and they could not jump on their own, and they told him to push them. And so he was doing this act of pushing people to their death, and then he jumped himself, and he also died. I know this story is sad. There is nothing sad, but I want you to see how Miss Perkins had to how this thing impacted her completely. She had to summon her higher self. So it was normal by 1911 for people to treat workers like this. Some years before, there was this immigrant. She was from Russia, and she was working in the same factory, and she had protested. She and her other colleagues, she had gathered them, and they had protested. The working conditions, they were so bad for the workers. It was terrible. And they had been protesting that the conditions they were working in were not safe, and nobody was listening to them. And then this fire happens. And after the fire, everybody went back to their life. Like nothing had happened. There was no issue with policy being changed. There was nothing issue with improving the workers' conditions. Nobody was improving anything. After all these people had died, so this was the point where it got to her. It got to her because she could not understand how they could continue with an environment like that. People in the middle class was okay with the condition as they were. They were not planning to change anything to better the lives of the poor. No, they were just okay. And she felt uncomfortable. She felt less restless about this situation, and she could not just sit and do nothing. She could not sit and do nothing. She became very impatient with the slow progress. Like, people could just wait and hope that one day things will change. But she hardened her heart. She was like, she was going to throw herself into this new cause to make the society a better place, to make the working conditions better for workers. She dedicated her life into improving the working conditions of the poor in America. And you can imagine, back then, they did not respect women to work. Women were not held in high esteem. So this woman is now working with men who don't probably respect her, making sure that the working conditions of the average American improves. She goes into factories. You can imagine her. She's just a woman working in factories, places that were dominated by the males in the society. She was there lobbying, campaigning, making sure that there was necessary changes. She had to come out of her element of being this middle-class woman who's just looking to get married and have children and be comfortable with that lifestyle. She came out of it, out of her element. She became a leader. She called her higher self, and she decided she doesn't want to see another death like this, and be comfortable with herself for doing nothing. She became uncomfortable. She summoned her higher self, and she became a leader and transformed herself and transformed the world. And and that's when, her mother was shocked. She says that she became somebody else. She couldn't recognize her own daughter, but she summoned her higher self. Doing everything that she was doing, it wasn't easy. She was encouraged by the Bible. Actually, I wrote the Bible verse that she really liked. She liked 1 Corinthians 15:58. She was, "Be ye steadfast, settled, and confide in the truth of this doctrine of resurrection." She remained steadfast. And I think that's like something that, if you want to stop being boring and average, you have to summon your higher self. Like, have a cause in life that you want to pursue. There are so many things that you can pursue in life. You can help people with mental health problems. You can help people with relationships, marriages. You can help even young girls gain confidence. You can help a lot of things. You can educate people about the impact of abortions, or as a Christian, you have a lot of things that you can do. You can stop being average and stop being boring and make impact in a big way in life and transform, like, day and night. People will be wondering, like, what happened to her? What happened to him? One day you are like this, and the next day, people change. Even there's a song that says, like, people say we used to be close, but some people can move from people you know to people you don't know. You can move from somebody that people don't know, but in a good way, because you summon your higher self, your higher values, your moral, your higher morals, and you decide, now, from now on, we are going to be living by these values. We are not going to be average no more. If I see something that in society that somebody has to speak up against, I must speak up. If I see something that needs changing, I will do my part to impact. You can even choose a line of a cause that really you want to impact and make impact. Some people want to end the world hunger, and they do it. Some people want to make sure that people feel love, and they make it their point to go around hugging people. You have to separate yourself and tap into that higher self. If you want to stop being boring, if you want to stop being average, you just have to pick something that means something to your higher self, and bring it to the world. Let the world see you. Let the world see you and what you stand for. You never know. You can make huge impact. I know maybe Frances Perkins didn't even know that she was going to impact the world the way she impacted the world. She became to be known as the woman behind the New Deal. When she saw the people fall to their death, it was going to change her, and she was going to be this force that can be we can reckon with. But we now know her, and she's an inspiration to many people. So you can also choose a cause, and it's not just about stopping to be average or stopping to be boring or people knowing your name. Is living your true self, living your higher version of yourself. It takes a lot of hard work, it takes a lot of dedication, and this is when your spirituality and your spiritual fitness comes to help you in hard times. Like for her, in hard times, she knew that she had to stay the cause and remain there. And if you know, there's a price to pay. There's a price to pay. She was a very solid. She was a very she loved solitude, but she had no choice. Her husband had mental health problems. Her daughter also had mental health problems. So as a public figure, she did not want to be so much in the public limelight, because they would probably, the media would probably attack her family and her children and her child. She did not want that. So she chose to stay away from the media. And sometimes the media, because they did not understand her, they were against her. They were against her. It's easy to pick up on somebody, it's easy to pick on somebody that you don't understand. And so because she was a little bit reserved, the media saw that as something to, saw that as a weakness, and they would pick on her. But it doesn't eliminate the fact that if deep down inside herself, we know that she did the work, that she committed to this cause, and we know that she was a dedicated person, and we can see the fruits. With this Christian woman, we saw the fruits of her work, and we are even still enjoying the fruits of her labor. So she moved, she summoned her higher self. This is the main point I'm saying. She summoned her higher self. When the time came, she summoned her higher self as a true Christian, as a true believer, and she used her values, her belief in Christ to help her become a servant leader. And we may not even have, most of us will never be able to thank her for everything she has done. She probably was never thanked by so many people that she worked for, but I know like the president really was very proud of her. But most people of her time, they didn't even appreciate this woman. But anyway, the lesson today is she summoned her higher self when she was faced by a situation to do nothing or to rise up to the occasion. She chose to rise up to the occasion. She chose the path. It wasn't going to be easy for her as a woman. It wasn't going to be easy for her to just go around the country campaigning, lobbying for the rights of workers, of the poor people. This was not what the average middle class woman was doing, or people were going to encourage her to do. Something inside of her, she's a very unique woman. Somewhere inside of her, she summoned her higher version, her higher self, her more virtuous self, instead of just falling into the average person who just does what they're told to do and what society expects of them. She expected better of herself, better of her spiritual life, and she summoned that higher person. She set out to do exactly what her higher self would do. It's a very, very difficult journey to even think about it, but I want you to think about this road to character. Your road to character, your own journey to character, to being a higher person, to being a more virtuous person, there are things you will need to start doing. You can't just remain average. We will need to see the fruits. We will need to see the fruits. So again, my name is Kanini. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Give me a comment below. Let me know what you think about summoning your higher self.